Now, what do you call a bread roll? A cob? A batch? A barm cake? A bread cake? A scuffler? A new exhibition at the British Library explores what we say and how we say it, highlighting the huge variety of accents and dialects spoken across the UK. Our resident Hartlepoolian Michael Smith went along to find out more. And by the way, I think he says bun.
Of course, we had our nannies and nursery maids, and Ethel was a great favourite.
I built myself quite a big pigeon loft and joined a local club.
We used to go to town quite a lot of a weekend to the library.
English is spoken and written by 1.8 billion people. That's nearly a third of the world's population. With so many voices, it's no wonder the English language has more accents and dialects than any other in the world.
For example, sitting on a street like this, drinking a coffee, you pick up on dozens of different accents, and I think one of the things you automatically do is you start making presumptions about the people that are talking in them, you know. You start imagining the history and where they're from, and, you know, you make up a little backstory for them.
The British Library is currently preparing an exhibition which explores how English has developed. From Anglo-Saxon epics like Beowulf to poetry scribbled down by John Betjeman. There are some real gems to listen to as well, in particular the voices of British prisoners of war in German internment camps, recorded in 1916.
There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger on him said to his father, "Here's the part of the goods that belongs to I." So the father given his share.
Accents can be very nuanced and difficult to imitate. The Germans recorded the accents of their prisoners so that their undercover spies could get them pitch perfect. There's something very moving about those recordings because, you know, we're familiar with what people looked like in World War I, but we're totally unfamiliar with what they sounded like, and I never imagined that, you know, the English language would have changed so much and it would sound so strange and exotic to us, you know. So they're very powerful. The exhibition also explores a very British preoccupation, received pronunciation, or RP, the supposedly correct accent that should be used in polite society.
The individual pronunciations vary from man to man, from district to district, from one social class to another. In fact, in modern civilized communities, a man's pronunciation is often the surest guide to his social status and to his education.
That recording was made in 1927. It's a gentleman called A. Lloyd James. He was a member of a committee called the BBC Advisory Committee on Spoken English. Now, this committee was set up in the 1920s to debate what sort of voice should be broadcast on the then fledgling BBC, so what voice we would hear on the radio.
So how did they choose that particular accent and who spoke it at the time?
At the time, it was and still is a very much a minority accent. It's associated with the upper middle classes. It first came to prominence in the 19th century in the public schools. It's a very young accent compared with regional accents in the UK, for instance. We actually have a recording of another member of the BBC Advisory Committee on Spoken English, George Bernard Shaw. This is recorded slightly earlier, and he describes a bit of a background to that committee.
I am now going to suppose that you are a foreign student of the English language, or it may be that you are yourself a native, but that you speak in a provincial or Cockney dialect of which you are a little ashamed, or which perhaps prevents you from obtaining some employment which is open to those only who speak what is called correct English.
That's incredible. It's that idea of correctness, I think, isn't it? It kind of seems so antiquated.
I think what's interesting about this notion of correct and somehow this prestigious variety is how powerful it is. The fact that for much of the 20th century people aspired to use this voice or certainly hoped their children would use this voice, maybe people who are hoping to get on socially. But most linguists suggest that only about 2% of the UK population at any time have ever spoken received pronunciation, and
Very
it's probably
surprising.
still true.
BBC Television. This is the switchboard of Picture Page.
Not many people talk in the cut crystal tones of early BBC recordings these days. But I wonder, why don't we want to talk posh like that anymore?
I think it depends partly on who the government will be in the future.
Okay.
I mean, I would be very interested to hear if there's any movement, if David Cameron stays in government, if there's any movement back towards the values of the way he speaks. The swing against RP was a direct result of people losing faith in Thatcherite policies.
Right.
It's very noticeable that post-Thatcher, the glottal stop started to be on the march.
Was it?
Yeah. And I mean, Tony Blair's a great example, isn't it? That he started very RP in terms of modern RP. And the more he felt threatened, or the more he felt he wasn't communicating, the more glottal stops he started to use. And the more he tried to speak like every man. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it's such a fluid thing, where do you think we're headed?
I think that one of the major changes in RP is a movement from major to minor key, and major key is as if I were on the white notes of the piano, so I'm on very, very definite notes. Minor key, which I'm exaggerating now, is as if I were on the black notes of the piano, so it's always going to sound a little bit plaintive or not quite sure of itself. So it's as if you can't be challenged. It's not provocative, really.
Far from being set in stone, English is like a sponge, absorbing new influences, with new accents emerging all the time.
Me not know Oxford done. Me a simple immigrant from Clapham Common. I didn't graduate, I immigrate. But listen, Mr. Oxford Dunn, I'm a man on the run, and a man on the run is a dangerous one. I ain't have no gun, I ain't have no knife, but mugging the Queen's English is the story of my life. I don't need no axe to split up your syntax. I don't need no hammer to mash up your grammar. I warning you, Mr. Oxford Dunn. I'm a wanted man, and a wanted man is a dangerous one.
When I arrived in England and when I look and see the houses, I thought they were factories because everything is all together.
It was part arable, part grazing, part cropping that the farm was.
I remember everything about the fish quay and the tugboats because we were down there every Sunday morning.
I think the interesting thing about accents and spoken English is it's not fixed, you know, it's very fluid and it's very reactive to the society that speaks it, and it responds to the changes in that society. It's almost like I've come to see it as the weather in a way, because like the weather, it reacts to the different atmospheric pressures on it, and whether that be a pressure front of immigration or a pressure front of economic change, it will respond to that change. And it's, you know, it's a moving, living thing.